welcome back, everybody. Another episode of the MNCAA podcast, Gopher Show, episode 139. I'm Drew Cove, joined as always by Nate Wells at Gopher State on Twitter, and everywhere else that you can find those things on social media. But Nate and I back again to talk after a bye week here. After the Gophers had a bye week, nothing to report. They came out undefeated on the bye week, which was definitely what you want to see from every team on the bye week. It certainly can go haywire sometimes. It can never go better than the bye week, but it can sometimes things can go haywire in terms of injuries or something like that, or setbacks or anything. But thankfully, the Gophers came out unscathed, but they did not come out unscathed in their first of the last stretch of weekends here before the regular season is over against Michigan. The Gophers escape with 2 Big Ten points in just a funny fashion, 3-2 overtime loss on Friday, and then a 2-2 tie on Saturday. They made it to overtime. They didn't finish in overtime, so you Gophers fans, you know what happened. We'll talk about that a little bit in depth later on. We're not going to try and dwell on it too much, but Gophers didn't get a win at Yost. They certainly did not make the Yost of OT. Nate, that's credit Nate Wells. That's from our show notes. But Nate, let's just start talking about Friday. Gophers scored first. Looked like they had a 2-goal lead early on, but I think where the wheels fell off on Friday was that sequence of Gophers score, called back on an offside. 7 seconds later, it becomes 1-1 Michigan instead of 2-0 Minnesota, and then they score again to make it 2-1 Michigan, and then the Gophers have to claw back to at least force overtime. But Nate, what are your impressions of Friday? Certainly a big turning point in the middle of the second period there.
We keep saying all season we don't really know what to make of Michigan. At times they seem like they're kind of the kid in the back who knows all the answers but isn't putting in the work. And it kind of felt a little bit there on Friday where they get the 2 goals in a couple minute spans. They turn a game that Minnesota is controlling and continuing a season of dominance between the two teams. And then the Gophers are trying to figure out how to claw back and are playing in a more defensive style game and just learning a little bit more about themselves. So for me, yeah, that was just the huge change momentum. It was both in the game and just I think on the weekend as a whole, where Minnesota gets that 2-0 goal to count. We're talking about a little bit of a slightly different series and slightly different weekend. But at the same time, I think honestly, this weekend is kind of a good reminder of how difficult it is to win this time of year and how difficult it is to win against top teams for the Gophers. Got a little bit spoiled on that Wisconsin series on the other side of the bye week. But the Gophers, they're playing heavy hitters all the way through to the end of the season. So even if you're able to find ways to win when you're not playing your best game, you still have to – you're playing against top teams and just you can't have off nights. And you can't really have – even just those off little momentums.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right. And that what's funny about that 2-0 lead – that would have been for the Gophers. That would have been 10 straight goals in 7 periods of hockey against Michigan this year, where Michigan had scored 0 in those first bits. So that was their first goal of the season series in the third game, in the second period of the third game, which it was quite impressive, I think, from just a team that is as talented. And as we mentioned multiple times before, just how up and down Michigan can be throughout the year. But to kind of put a bow, we're going to certainly go to more big picture stuff this week, folks. But just to kind of put a bow on the Friday game, Jimmy Clark got the 2-2 equalizer in the middle of the third period. But nothing in OT after a penalty. They're on the penalty kill for the last 2 minutes of OT and didn't need all that time. And Michigan scores to walk off the Gophers to head to Saturday for some renewed vigor for the game. But Michigan comes in Saturday. Gophers come out actually firing on their only power play goal of the weekend. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But Matthew Wood scoring to open the scoring itself. Then Michigan fights back. Then the Gophers get another lead, and then Michigan claws back again to make it a 2-2 tie. Ends up being 2 1-goal blown leads in the game. Ends in the tie. Goes to the shootout. Gophers miss all 3. And it's definitely more of the same from the Gophers streak here. We'll give it to you just this once. 28 straight misses But we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth here too. But certainly not the weekend the Gophers wanted from that standpoint. And also we should note, just before we tee off the conversation, Liam Soulier started both games. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Nate, what do you make of Saturday? And just obviously once we kind of make our way through Saturday, just briefly touch on the shootout futility that we kind of almost it is a little bit. The emotions are certainly different every time it happens. But what do you make of the Saturday game that the Gophers actually got out to a lead and had a couple of leads throughout the game?
It was a better performance overall, I thought, despite Michigan coming back twice. I mean, it speaks to the Wolverines and their ability. TJ Hughes right now, I think, is the hottest player in college hockey. He has the longest point streak of the season, 15 games, and he is playing it like it. He is certainly he's not a Hughes brother, but he's continuing the stretch of Michigan having some Hughes dominance there.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought the Gophers, I was happy with their performance. They're getting opportunities. Just they weren't solving Loganstein at the same time. I'm trying not to let the end result of the shootout kind of sour the taste. They still ended up tying, and I mean, you take a tie against the top 15 team on the road.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just, but looking at the big picture of the weekend and taking out the shootout, which at this point is just gallows humor. It's kind of an insanely ridiculous stat that we may never see again. And I've seen some bad shootouts in college hockey. This is not a bad shootout. This is a stretch that is almost about 5 years in the making. So to see that continue, but looking over at the weekend as a whole, we learned. I think we learned a little bit more about Michigan this weekend, where you can see you can see the pieces for the Wolverines and how they're able to play a strong game against those top teams, where they've won in overtime against Michigan State a couple times. They played well against Ohio State, but you also see the moments where the wheels come off and they don't have that consistency. But when they're on, they're a top 10 team. For them, it's that consistency is missing. And for Minnesota, they have the consistency, and it's kind of just finding those opportunities and the stretches where they're turning into second and third gear and kind of be able to put teams away. We haven't really seen that as much in the last month and a half. We can only see about a handful of examples. So for me, that's a little bit more what I'm looking for the Gophers as we hit down this final stretch. But I think I continue seeing the bits of Michigan where they're tougher out than we give them credit for, but also at the same time, you're seeing what the difference is between a top 5 team and a top 15 team, and how that doesn't matter as much on a game-to-game basis versus over the entire season.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it kind of leads into just even the goals against too. We saw, just to talk about goaltending a little bit too, Liam Soulier again got both games, which I think was a good decision. I think he's been very inspiring of late, and kind of seeing all of the 5 goals against was, I think one of them he could have stopped. It was kind of I think it was Hughes in on Cal Thomas of all people. It got by Thomas on a puck off the skate and just kind of just sent it right through the middle of Soulier. But I think Soulier looked good in both games. I think he made all the stops that he really had to. There was a lot of screens and a lot of guys left up front to make some clean tips that are just hard to stop. So not saying that he shouldn't have stopped. That's kind of the thing. It's like, what's the difference? Like, are you going to be the difference maker goalie that makes 1 or 2 otherworldly stops to kind of keep the game going? Are you going to make all the stops you're supposed to make, or are you going to let in a few ones that you really should have had? I think he's at the top end of the middle section there, if that makes any sense. But I thought he played really well this weekend against a Michigan team that was a lot more dialed in than the first time around. And I think that's good for Minnesota, because obviously that was one of our talking points the last few weeks, Nate, was who's gonna make the call, who's gonna decide, all right, I'm the number 1 right now. I'm not a 1A, I'm not a 1B. I'm the guy that's gonna play down the stretch. And I think Soulier doing that against a more dialed in Michigan team helps solidify, I think, his ability to have the last 4 starts against Ohio State and Penn State.
I think until he gives away the opportunity, it's his for for the time being. Especially, it's nothing against Nathan Airy. I still think he's been a fantastic goalie all season.
Oh, yeah.
And if he gets back in the net, he will do a fantastic job as well. But this time of year, you want to have a number one goalie, and the way that Soulier has been playing is certainly keeping Minnesota in games, and he's given them an opportunity to win with the Gophers offense, which that's been their recipe for success this season, where they're utilizing depth, they're getting 3, 4, 5 goals in a game. They're also able to kind of keep things close. And this weekend, they weren't able to find that third goal either night. And that is the difference. If you get that third goal on Friday night, I think we're thinking a little bit more differently about this weekend than we would be than we're talking about right now. There's certainly some room for the Gophers to create more opportunities to get those scoring chances and get that third goal, whether it's doing a better job on the power play. I think multiple people asked me what was going on the power play this weekend. I mean, fairness, the Gophers haven't really had too many chances the last few weeks. Big Ten refs are basically letting you get away with anything, but they went 1 for 6 this weekend, and just they had opportunities, especially against Michigan, who we keep preaching about being a little bit more disciplined. If you have 6 opportunities, certainly being able to bury 1 or 2 more makes a huge difference. And the other one is face-offs, where you're seeing. I was kind of just watching the game, and I was like, okay, Oliver Moore is kind of giving them a little bit more opportunity for this line. It seems like he's playing a little bit well, but they're still 50th in college hockey in faceoffs, and they're losing more than they're winning, and being behind and losing some key draws to start periods, to start power plays. And just once you lose the puck and you have to take 20, 30 seconds to get the offense back, that's time that you're wasting.
Yeah. And I mean, there is a lot of, I think just from what I've seen too on various, like a lot of hockey circles there's a lot of people who really don't think the importance of face-offs or there's not a significant importance on the value of winning a lot of face-offs. But I mean, I just think from the start of a play, having the puck right away is especially on the power play. It's invaluable to the amount of time you have to make something good for your team happen. And that one thing I'll never shy away from. Like, you got to be 50% or better in the face-offs if you want to have any good chance of being successful in the power play. Just the more stoppages in play, you never know what's going to happen. You got to be good at getting the puck, and it can't just be having a good forecheck. Having a good forecheck is great too, but winning the face-off, that's like, all right, here's an absolute 50-50 battle where you don't have to put your body on the line unless you're going against Ryan Hartman, I guess. But you don't have to put your body on the line for a face-off win. But it still just goes to say that the Gophers have been it's been definitely an uphill battle so far this year in terms of face-off percentage. They're let's take a look here. I had the stat up. They are 47.4% in the faceoffs this year. 50th, tied with Ohio State, coincidentally. They've got to be a little better. And certainly, I think, Nate, you mentioned before the show started, Oliver Moore had a good weekend. I think Aaron Huglin had a good weekend. He's, I think, been one of their more stable guys in the circle so far this year. But Oliver Moore kind of coming up and showing some improvement there this weekend. But yeah, it's tough, and I don't think this is not necessarily a knock on Eric Paulson, but 7 of 29 this weekend. It's just that's one thing. He's excelled as a freshman, I think, in this game, but I think it does take to win faceoffs against a bunch of guys who have been playing college hockey for a long time. Just like we're finally seeing it with Oliver Moore now. I think it takes a little bit more time sometimes, and obviously nobody's going to be the completely well-rounded, polished guy right away as a freshman, even as he's I think excelling as a freshman, being overdoing what I think his expectations even were coming in as a little bit of an older guy. But still, I think there's definitely some room to grow there, but I think he can get there. I think there's just a lot of reliance on a younger freshman guy to be an important faceoff man this year. Like we said, Nate, if we could have Jackson Nelson back for his 13th, 14th, 15th year of eligibility, whatever it was, man, they'd love to have an older guy who's been doing it for such a long time to help round out that center depth.
They certainly would. I mean, going on the road as well, and not having last change and having teams be able to match up against, and there certainly seemed like Michigan is matching up against Paulson, Snuggerud, to stop them. I mean, it's a tougher matchup to start the faceoff. But even then, if you're losing those D zones, if you're not able to kind of get anything the puck going, just it's pretty much you're spending your time on the back heels in the shift. And we've seen when Minnesota is successful, and this was certainly a weekend where the Gophers were able to make their own, but at the same time, there's certainly some lost opportunities.
Yeah, and especially as you mentioned too, Nate, the power play penalty kill. I want to dive into the penalty kill a little bit too. It's just obviously power play. Gophers are still 17th in the country in the power play, I believe, 23%, 23 point something percent. Obviously not as high. Quinnipiac, I think, is clipping at a 31% rate right now, which is pretty good. That's number one in the country, obviously, but that's a pretty good rate. But I think on the penalty kill, the Gophers they still have to be better. They are they're 75.7% on the penalty kill. They did a little better on that this weekend, and I will give it to them. There is an asterisk because the one power play goal scored against was a 4-on-3 in overtime. So obviously they were 4 for 5 on the penalty kill. Besides that, and that's not to completely make excuses. Obviously, it's better than the rate that this season, but I mean, when you see BC and Western at the top with 91.7 and 91.5. I think this Gophers defense should be a little better at that so far this season, and just making sure you have. Obviously, the Gophers are really good at playing 5-on-5. I think so. The last few years generally, but yeah, there's got to be something that something as the season progresses, and obviously there's not a lot left. But come tournament time, they're going to have to be locked down on the penalty kill because just those opportunities are going to be so magnified because it is one and done once we get to a certain point here, Nate.
Yeah, and they're playing teams who are able to draw penalties just as well as Minnesota, where the Gophers' strengths has been their discipline. They don't take bad penalties. They don't give the opposition too many opportunities with the man advantage. That has been Minnesota's saving grace for much of the season, with the penalty kill being clipping at what did you say it was 75%?
Yep, 75.7.
All right, so giving up a goal once every 4 times, but if you're only giving 4 power plays a week, if you're only giving up 4 power plays a week into the opposing team, that's certainly a different story than if you're giving up 4 power plays every game. And that has been Minnesota's MO more than anything. But I'm with you. Yeah, I feel like the Gophers penalty kill certainly has improved over the last month, but you kind of just would like to see them kind of take a little bit more of those next steps. The only little things that we're kind of nitpicking about are just those little differences between good and great, and when the Gophers are able to play with a high-end team versus kind of put into second gear and kind of take over a game.
Exactly. This is less of a let's review exactly what happened against Michigan and see and more of what are the Gophers going to need to do better BC could very well be in the Frozen Four, and they're going to have to go. I mean, if they don't meet them in the round of 4, they meet them in the national championship game somehow. That might be a pretty important stat. If they're clipping at a 91% penalty kill, like that's going to be, even if they get those opportunities, they're going to have to be razor sharp to make those opportunities count. And that's kind of those like you were saying, nitpicking the differences between what the Gophers might need to do better against the teams that certainly look Frozen Four bound at the very top. And that's not to say Minnesota's not close to the very top. They're still third in the pairwise. Again, just like 2 weeks ago, nitpicking a few things and then saying, all right, yeah, they're still the third best team in the country. Yes. But it's just kind of a matter of diving into the minutia of what they're doing to be successful and to kind of see see why, obviously. So, Nate, I think that does put a good bow on what this weekend means for the grand scheme of things for the Gophers heading into the end of the season here. But anything else you wanna touch on to cap off the Michigan series?
Oh, well, I'll segue it a little bit. And you mentioned playing a Boston College, or again going back to Michigan State or Maine, if Minnesota is able to make the Frozen Four, play those teams.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan is in a position where the Gophers in the NCAA first round are going to play a team around Michigan's caliber, kind of somewhere in that area. So that makes it kind of even more to the forefront of kind of digging into the details and seeing, hey, Minnesota's successful when they do this. Minnesota struggles when this happens. What are they able to kind of be able to change? If they're able to win that game, they're going to play a team who is on this somewhere around Ohio State's caliber in the next round, which actually it even could be Ohio State. So to put together on the weekend. So that's kind of where it is, where the rest of the way, the Gophers are playing teams that are either going to be in the NCAA tournament or are fighting for their lives to make the NCAA tournament and have played well. They might have outside of the first round of the Big Ten postseason, but there's a lot of stakes in the regular season. But the bigger stakes are for the Gophers, how they're able to play and how they're able to make these adjustments against these top teams over the next month or over the next 6 weeks to go.
Yeah, Nate, you mentioned Ohio State. We're going to talk about them in depth here in just a little bit. But let's go around the conference to see what happened in the Big Ten this weekend while the Gophers got two of the possible 6 points. Let's start, Nate, with Penn State and Notre Dame. Penn State swept Notre Dame this weekend. 5-3 win on Friday, 3-2 win on Saturday. As you mentioned kind of before the show, Nate, Nittany Lions they've had a great 2025 so far. They're currently 16th in the pairwise, 9-2-3 since the 1st of January. Nate, what have you been seeing, obviously, from what you've been able to see out of Penn State to kind of in this surge, and obviously a little bit of an early preview of the Gophers' final regular season opponent of the year?
The big thing with the Nittany Lions is they have learned to win, and there was a big stretch of the first half of the Big Ten regular season and we saw it against Minnesota. We saw it against when they played Michigan. We've seen it against a couple other teams where they dropped winnable games, or they weren't able to come through when there were opportunities. And it even happened at the game of Wrigley against Notre Dame there, where Penn State had a very winnable game, kind of slipped through their hands. I believe they ended up losing in the shootout. So over the last few weeks, they've been able to just kind of take those lessons learned, and one win has led to another, which has led to another. Aiden Fink has certainly been on a tear. I believe he leads the nation in points right now. He overtook him, Mr. Snuggerud, over the weekend. And we're seeing just from the Nittany Lions that they have that confidence. They've learned how to win. They're beating the teams that are around them in the Big Ten standings. They swept Wisconsin last week. They swept Notre Dame. According to their game notes, this was the first time that they've ever taken 6 points in back-to-back Big Ten series, which is really huge because they've won the conference. They've made 3 NCAA tournaments. They would have made a 4th if 2020 wasn't canceled. Mm-hmm. So I know my wife will let me hear about that one once we're done talking about this. So, but Penn State has kind of they have found their way to win, and they control their destiny. The tough part for them, though, is they're kind of in that same situation Minnesota is, where all the teams that they're playing that are left are going to be the NCAA tournament teams. The end of the season with Michigan State, they play Minnesota at home, and then, well, they're in 5th right now in the Big Ten standings, and they can certainly move up the 4th and get home ice. I believe they're kind of fighting with Michigan for maybe that 4th Big Ten spot in the NCAA tournament, but they're going to end up playing Ohio State or Michigan in the Big Ten first round. So win that, and then you're probably playing again Michigan State or Minnesota. So it's basically their postseason starts now. So that's a tough thing for Penn State, but they're winning the games they should. and they're doing it pretty convincingly. They went on a tear on the Friday, just they jumped out to a 3-0 lead, and just they were certainly the better team against Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's they've obviously, you said they control their own destiny, and it's like, all right, if they find ways to beat Michigan State and Minnesota, and then roll through the Big Ten playoffs, I mean, you know what? That's them saying, hey, you know what? We're beating the good teams. We deserve to be here too. And then they just come in and play their way in. And it's like, all right, it's kind of hard to argue if they've had such a good start and they play their way in and they beat good teams doing it. It's hard to. I know they're the team that ruined college hockey, but still, like, they're gonna have to. They might be ruining some of the other teams on the fringe of the NCAA playoffs too if they're able to sneak their way into securing another spot for another Big Ten team and shutting out even more of the rest of the landscape of college hockey.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because it looks like Penn State and Michigan are going to play one another to get a fifth Big Ten team in. So it seems like one of those are going to knock out the other. But man, imagine if you have that Penn State Michigan first round series where basically the winner gets to the NCAA tournament, the loser season's over. That might be one of the best Big Ten first rounds that we've ever seen.
It'll be very interesting to watch, and certainly we'll definitely be watching it, especially if the stakes are that high. But Nate, moving on to Minnesota's next opponent, we'll touch on Michigan State. They had the week off. They escaped the bye undefeated, just like every team has so far this year. But the Gophers' next opponent, Ohio State, they swept Wisconsin 4-1 Friday and 4-2 Saturday. 6 straight losses for the Badgers. Boy, this is tough, especially for a team that's had such an up and down season, Nate. And I know you're shedding a singular tear. You're playing the smallest violin for the Badgers at Kohl Center. But what did you see from obviously Wisconsin reeling, Ohio State surging? Let's kind of use this as a springboard into Ohio State. But just what a weekend for Ohio State, and what a weekend for the Badgers.
Those are they could be some really weird series between Ohio State and Wisconsin. And, credit to Steve. I'm sure Steve Rollick feels great because his team is pretty much has an opportunity to finish second in the Big Ten. They're in the NCAA tournament, and he swept his alma mater, and who pretty much passed him over those couple of years ago as head coach. We're all like, okay, well, Steve Rollick's going to get paid one way or another. And you know what? It was just a methodical beatdown. It was kind of the same thing that we saw from the Badger or Minnesota to do against the Badgers a couple weeks ago. And just Wisconsin is off. They are off. And I mean, the Friday night game was Wisconsin went up 1-0 and just it collapsed. It was just I'd feel bad, but I can't. It's Wisconsin, so I don't feel bad. It was.
You can take the boy out of Minnesota, but it's hard to, I mean, and all the St. Paul you could have followed the same St. Paul to Badger pipeline that so many have done in the past, Steve Rollick included.
Steve Rollick is one of them. I wrote
exactly.
I did the program for I think it was 2015 for was it 2015? No, it was 2016. The Big Ten, the hockey tournament at the X, and I did it on St. Paul and everything, and I did it on Steve Rollick because he grew up in St. Paul, went to Hill, always sneak into the X to watch the high school tournament, and I got to basically just chat St. Paul with him and go back and forth on that, and that was really fun. So
yeah,
I mean, there are a lot of St. Paul Badgers, but look, we covered Minnesota for many years. We know Wisconsin very well. We've both been down there covering it. At the same time, it's. The only surprise, I think, is that we expected, and we saw for a bit, that the Mike Hastings team doing better as it was as the season went on, and kind of thought maybe that would continue. And hey, maybe there's a hiccup here or there. Minnesota swept them. Okay, that happens. Okay, they're playing Penn State. This is going to be a tough series, but maybe they'll bounce back. It's a Mike Hastings team, and that wasn't the case. And they fell flat, and then they fall flat even more against Ohio State. And basically, at this point, Wisconsin it doesn't matter what they do the next 2 weekends. They have to win the Big Ten tournament. They're probably going to finish 6th, barring they have to basically they only have one series left. They have to basically sweep that and hope that Penn State gets rocked by Michigan State and Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, they're pretty much they know what they have to do, and they're basically at last call.
Yeah, boy, it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend if they actually have that wake up call this weekend, if they're able to have that push, that we were kind of maybe expecting them to have against Penn State and then Ohio State, and it kind of kept falling flat, and now 6 straight losses. But Nate, you know what? Let's move on to Ohio State. We talked a little bit about them before, and as you mentioned earlier, that they could finish second in the Big Ten. They quietly, maybe loudly, I don't know, it depends on how closely you've been paying attention to the Big Ten standings week in and week out, but they are currently tied with the Gophers after this weekend in terms of points in Big Ten conference points. They both have 40 points, tied for second, just 3 points behind Michigan State. So there's a lot of opportunity to move around here and to see the Gophers maybe finish third. It's certainly a season where they thought, it'd be them and Michigan State vying for the very top spot, and whoever finishes second would just finish second, and then there'd be a somewhat significant gap to Michigan. But no, Ohio State staked their claim and had such a resurgent year, and now the Gophers have to go up against them to see to really make a huge difference on what the Big Ten conference standings could look like in kind of coming near the end of the season, obviously with just a couple weeks left.
Yeah, we did not expect the standings to be so close and put together. I mean, even you can make the argument, well, Michigan State's playing Penn State this weekend, and there's the opportunity for a good weekend by one of those two teams to jump across the Spartans and take first place. I believe it's they're only 2 points. They're only 2 or 3 points ahead.
Yep.
Of both. So even that's kind of a little bit up in the air at the moment. You have the 4th and 5th battle that I just mentioned as well for the last home ice spot. So there is a lot to be played the last 2 weeks. Minnesota goes to Penn State, Ohio State plays Michigan their final weekend of the season. So that one's kind of similar. It puts a lot of pressure on this final weekend for the Gophers at home against Ohio State because because they can basically solidify their Big Ten place right now, or they can end up in third. And there is a difference playing, as much as we just ragged on Wisconsin for the segment before this, there is a difference between playing Wisconsin, who is fighting for their season and is basically playing Wisconsin for fighting for the season versus Notre Dame, who is basically checked out and on the Jeff Jackson retirement tour in the first round. And there's a huge difference between also getting that first round bye. So all those are at stake. Ohio State, Minnesota will not forget that Friday night route that they played. They also showed the best the previous series. They also won't forget the Saturday night route of their own. And you can see, especially, I feel like that kind of kickstarted the stretch where we've seen the best of Minnesota, we've seen the worst of Minnesota at times, and just kind of finding a little bit more of that consistency and being able to put together 2 good efforts against a team that has been top 10. And again, I said it last week, I said it about a month ago, but credit to Ohio State. They're playing better than we've given them credit for. But for me this weekend, it's getting the depth firing, maybe getting an extra power play goal, kind of being able to get to 3 on Ohio State, and just having that consistency. I would rather see 2 closer games with a solid effort for Minnesota than just the high-low that was out in Columbus.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you said, we've seen both ends of it. We've seen Ohio State firing on all cylinders in the blowout, and we've seen Minnesota firing on all cylinders in the blowout. That's why I think, to me, it seems like a very, very intriguing series to watch, because what are we going to get? Are we going to get both teams kind of firing, and it's going to be some kind of 1-0 just stalemate across both games, or what are we really going to see? And I think both teams, that's the thing, both teams have really they have the ability to do a lot of different things, and we've seen them do a lot of different things across a lot of their games so far this year. So it's not as predictable as maybe some series, even as a series against Michigan State. I feel like that's even a more predictable series at times than against this one against Ohio State. So it'll be really intriguing to see for me. I just want to see two teams that are really at a head and pretty competitively balanced, I think, from obviously pairwise rankings look a little different, but within the conference, they've gotten the equal amount of points. So it's certainly a pretty tight battle for second/third place right here. And it'll be, to see what happens for Mariucci will be interesting, especially I think first period Friday night. I think we'll understand a lot after the first period Friday night, because sometimes they've come out, gotten scored on pretty early in the first periods of Friday nights, and they either turn it on or they don't, and usually that sometimes that has a pretty profound effect on what happens Saturday as well. So I'm very excited for this weekend series, and should be a really, really fun one from the arena formerly known as Mariucci Arena.
It should, and honestly, I can't believe it's already senior weekend. It's like senior day is
last home series of
the
year.
last home series of the year. So his season just kind of flown by.
Yeah.
At the same time, I mean, I really do like that Minnesota Ohio State matchup, and it's credit to the job that Rollick's done and who he's brought in, and kind of making that. It's just, you see the difference in like having the right players come in and gel, and kind of making those additions to a team rather than kind of making these wholesale changes. Mm-hmm. That seemed kind of made the difference between what failed last year and what worked this year. So with Ohio State, and they were pretty much, I wouldn't even say Michigan really did it this year, where them and Ohio State and Michigan State are the only two teams that have kind of been able to stop Minnesota's kind of resilience, kind of come back and being like, and actually just put things down. And I'll give them that credit. But at the same time, I could see this game really anything short of the Gophers scoring a shootout goal, I will put on the board as I will not be surprised.
I mean, I think I can agree with you right there. Yeah. I think we've said it for a couple of different series. Even Michigan State, I think we were like, this could go literally any way. And it certainly went the way. We could have seen 6 points pretty easily, but then we could have seen what actually happened the last time around. And it is kind of when you see how good the rest of the Big Ten's gotten, it's not Minnesota rolling over mostly everybody anymore. And it hasn't been that way for a while, obviously, but it is fun to see when there's a lot more intrigue with these February games than I think there used to be. Especially, I mean, when I started covering the team too, there wasn't as much intrigue, I guess, with some of these late season Big Ten games, because maybe just the competition just still wasn't there. But it certainly is, and I think I still hold true to that. It's been the best conference in college hockey for a few years now, and very excited to see what happens come the end of the season and come tournament time. But Nate, I think that does it for us this week. Thanks again to everybody for listening. We'll be back next week to talk everything about the Ohio State series, whichever way it goes. We're going to be intrigued to see which way it goes, because I don't think we have any clear idea of how the points could be awarded. But we'll be back again with you. But until next time, we'll see you at the rink.